At 2:15 p.m. on December 18, 1944, Private James Rourke crouched inside a frozen Belgian barn with a modified Springfield and a technique no manual authorized. German infantry advanced across 300 yards of snow. 9 targets, 6 minutes. In the next hour, his forbidden method would save an entire company, trigger a court-martial investigation, and rewrite American sniper doctrine for the next 8 decades. The Ardennes forest didn't care about regulations. Rourke pressed his cheek against wood that smelled like cattle and old hay. Through a gap he'd cut at ankle height, he watched gray uniforms moving between trees. His hands shook, not from cold, from what he was about to do. The gap was 4 inches wide, 8 inches tall, cut horizontally along the barn's foundation where wall met floor, positioned 18 inches above ground level. Every field manual said chest height. Every instructor at Fort Benning said eye level. Every doctrine since World War I said stand, kneel, or go prone at window height. Rourke had cut his firing position where cows shit. The Germans kept coming, 40 men, maybe 50, moving in textbook formation toward the farmhouse, where Lieutenant Brennan and 12 Americans waited with 2 Browning machine guns and diminishing ammunition. The barn sat 80 yards northwest of the farmhouse. Perfect flanking position. The kind of position doctrine called a sniper's dream. Except doctrine assumed you'd fire from normal height. Rourke had other ideas. 6 minutes until the Germans reached effective range for their Kar 98Ks. 6 minutes before they spotted the barn's strategic value and sent a squad to clear it. 6 minutes to prove his method worked or die trying to explain why he'd violated every rule in the book. He settled into position, belly flat against frozen dirt. Springfield extended through the gap. Eye aligned with scope. The position felt wrong in every way. Training said positions should feel. But Rourke had learned something in 3 months of watching American snipers die in Belgium, something no instructor at Benning ever mentioned. The enemy aims where they expect you to be. Germans expected snipers in windows. Nobody expected them in cattle doors. James Rourke grew up in Pittsburgh's Lawrenceville district, where the steel mills painted everything orange, and the Allegheny River smelled like industry. His father worked blast furnaces at Jones and Laughlin Steel. His uncle ran a butcher shop on Butler Street. Rourke spent his teenage years learning both trades: how to read molten metal, how to break down a side of beef with minimum cuts, precision and patience. Those were the skills Pittsburgh gave him. He enlisted December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. Turned 18 that morning. Signed papers that afternoon. His father said nothing, just shook his hand and went to work the night shift. His mother cried and packed him sandwiches. His uncle gave him advice that seemed irrelevant at the time. Clean cuts, no wasted motion, do it right once. Fort Benning made him a rifleman. The Army discovered he could shoot. Not competition shooting, not fancy marksmanship. Just the grim, mechanical ability to put bullets where they needed to go. They sent him to sniper school. 12 weeks learning to read wind, estimate range, control breathing, and most importantly, position himself in windows, behind walls, in tree lines at chest height where American doctrine said snipers operated. Normandy taught him doctrine had problems. He landed on Omaha Beach with the 2nd Infantry Division. Made it through the hedgerows, saw France in August, Belgium in September. By October, he'd watched 7 American snipers die in situations that shouldn't have killed them, Not from bad shooting, from predictable positioning. Private Danny Pierce, Newark, age 20. Killed September 14th. Outside breast. Set up in a church steeple, textbook elevated position. German countersniper put 3 rounds through the bell tower window before Pierce fired twice. They found him slumped against the bell, scope shattered, his final sight picture still perfect, according to manual standards. Corporal Frank Dietz, Milwaukee, age 23, killed October 2nd near Aachen. Positioned himself in a warehouse window, 2nd floor, excellent sight lines on a German supply route. A Panzerschreck team spotted the window, waited for muzzle flash, put a rocket through the building. The explosion killed Dietz and 2 other men. Private Eugene Hayes, Corpus Christi, age 19, killed November 8th in the Hurtgen forest. Found the perfect hide in a destroyed bunker, firing Slit at regulation height. German machine gunner had pre-ranged every firing Slit in that sector. Hayes got off 4 shots. The MG-42 response shredded everything above waist level. Rourke watched patterns emerge. American snipers positioned themselves where manuals said. Windows, doors, firing slits, always at eye level or chest level, where shooting felt natural and sight pictures formed easily, where every doctrine since the trenches said shooters operated. The Germans knew this. German countersnipers had read the same manuals. They watched windows. They pre-ranged obvious positions. They waited for muzzle flash at expected heights. And American snipers kept dying. November brought Rourke to Belgium with what remained of his company. 63 men down to 42. They held a village called Rocherath, population 200, notable only for sitting on the main road to Malmedy. By December, intelligence reported German armor massing in the Ardennes. Nobody important believed it. The Ardennes was quiet sector. Exhausted divisions went there to rest. The Germans wouldn't attack through forest in winter. December 16th proved intelligence right and command wrong. The offensive hit before dawn. Artillery, armor, infantry. The entire German 6th Army, Panzer Army driving west like it was 1940 again. Rourke's company pulled back to a farmhouse complex 3 miles east of Rocherath. Lieutenant Brennan, fresh from Fort Riley, established defensive positions. 2 machine guns, 12 rifles, 1 Springfield with scope. Brennan looked at Rourke. Think you can slow them down? Where do you want me? Barn, northwest corner. Pick off officers when they advance. Standard assignment, standard positioning. Rourke had 3 different window positions prepared in that barn. Head height, knee height, prone at door level. Every one of them would get him killed the moment he fired, because every one of them was exactly where German countersnipers expected American shooters. That night, December 17th, Rourke couldn't sleep. He lay in the barn loft, listening to artillery rumble in the east, thinking about Pierce in his steeple, Dietz at his window, Hayes at his firing slit. All dead because they followed doctrine. All killed because the enemy knew American patterns better than Americans did. There had to be another way. Rourke climbed down from the loft, found tools in a shed, saw, hammer, crowbar. The barn's north wall faced the direction Germans would come. The wall was old timber, gaps between boards where weather had worked the wood. At ground level, where wall met foundation, there was a gap cattle used for drainage, 4 inches tall, 16 feet wide. He started cutting. The work was quiet, controlled. He removed boards at ankle height, expanding the drainage gap into something a rifle barrel could fit through. 4 inches became 8. 8 inches tall, 50 inches wide. He reinforced the opening's top edge so it wouldn't collapse. Cut firing ports every 6 feet along the wall, positioned them 18 inches above ground level. The smell was terrible. Decades of cattle urine, frozen manure, rot. His hands stuck to the wood. Splinters dug under fingernails. The saw blade kept binding on old nails, and his thumb started bleeding where he'd slipped with the crowbar. It took him until 1:30 a.m. He tested the position, lay flat, extended the Springfield through the gap, eye to scope. The sight picture was perfect. 30-degree field of view, clear lines on the approach from the east, and most importantly, 18 inches off the ground where no German would think to look. Court-martial risk flashed through his mind. Unauthorized modification of defensive positions, destruction of civilian property, operating outside tactical doctrine, dishonorable discharge, prison time. But the calculation was simple. Follow regulations and probably die, or break regulations and possibly live. He chose life. December 18th dawned gray and frozen. German scouts probed the perimeter at 9:30 a.m. 6 men testing American positions. They withdrew after token fire. Brennan knew what was coming. The scouts would report. The main force would arrive before dark, and the farmhouse would be overrun unless something disrupted. German timing. At 1:45 p.m., Rourke moved into the barn. He carried the Springfield, 80 rounds in stripper clips, 2 canteens, and a trench knife. No radio, no backup. Brennan's orders were simple. Harass their advance. Buy us time to prepare fallback positions. Don't get killed. Rourke said nothing about his modified firing position. He settled into the barn's north wall, chose the center firing port, arranged ammunition within reach, tested sight picture again, then waited. Outside, snow fell in lazy spirals. The forest edge sat 300 yards east. Between forest and farmhouse, open ground, gentle slope, scattered fence posts from a property line that no longer mattered. Perfect killing ground if you could dominate it. At 2:15 p.m., the Germans appeared. 40 men in winter camouflage emerging from tree line, moving in squad formations. 4 men up front, main body 20 yards back. An officer walking in the second rank with a map case. Textbook advance. Cautious but confident. They'd done this before, cleared dozens of farmhouses from Luxembourg to here. Rourke watched them come. His breathing slowed. Heartbeat dropped to 48 beats per minute, the rate his body found when concentration peaked. The Germans were at 250 yards, then 200. They moved with the kind of efficiency that came from experience. No wasted motion, no conversation, just advance. The officer paused to check his map. 180 yards. Rourke exhaled, squeezed. The Springfield cracked. The officer dropped. Not dramatic, just vertical, to horizontal in a second. The Germans reacted instantly, dropped prone, scanned for the shooter. 40 pairs of eyes searching windows, doors, roofline, searching at eye level where snipers positioned themselves. Nobody looked at the barn's foundation. Rourke cycled the bolt, found his second target. Squad leader crawling toward cover, squeezed, hit. The man stopped crawling. The Germans started firing, blind suppressive fire at the barn's windows. 30 rifles pumping rounds into chest-high positions that Rourke wasn't occupying. He fired again. Third target, then fourth. The engagement stretched into pattern. Germans would advance. Rourke would fire. Germans would return fire at phantom positions while he stayed flat against frozen dirt where their bullets passed overhead. They couldn't see his muzzle flash. The gap was too low. Their sight lines were too high. And every doctrine they'd learned said American snipers fired from normal height. By 2:19 p.m., Rourke had dropped 7 men. The German advance stalled. Their remaining NCO tried rallying them. Rourke put a round through his chest at 140 yards. 8th kill. The formation broke. Men scrambled for the tree line. Rourke tracked a runner. Fired. 9th kill. 6 minutes since his first shot. Then silence. The Germans stayed in the forest. Rourke stayed at his firing port. His shoulder ached from recoil. The barn smelled like gunpowder and cattle. He counted ammunition, 43 rounds remaining. The Springfield's barrel was hot enough to make moisture steam where snow touched metal. Brennan's voice carried from the farmhouse. "Rourke, you alive?" "Alive. What the hell did you do?" "Slowed them down." What he'd actually done was trigger a doctrinal crisis. The German company commander crouched in the tree line, studying the barn through binoculars. Hauptmann Werner Koch, 28, veteran of Poland, France, and 2 years on the Eastern Front. He'd cleared 100 French villages, killed partisans in Belarus, survived Kursk. He understood how American snipers operated. Except this one made no sense. Koch had watched his men die from fire that came from nowhere. Muzzle flash at ground level, impossible angle. His counter-sniper, Gefreiter Hans Luters, scanned the barn structure methodically. Windows empty, doors intact, roof undisturbed, no visible firing position. "Where is he?" Koch demanded. "I don't know, Herr Hauptmann." "You're a sniper. Find him." Luters stared at the barn. "The only angle that works is below window level, foundation level." "That's absurd." "It's the only explanation." Koch called for mortars. At 3:30 p.m., 6 mortar rounds hit the barn. They detonated at roof level and upper wall. Impressive demolition. Completely ineffective against a shooter positioned at ankle height. Rourke felt concussion, heard timber crash, but the foundation-level gap remained intact. He watched Germans advance again during the mortar's smoke cover. He shot 3 more before they retreated. By evening, Koch withdrew his company. 12 dead, 4 wounded, 0 progress. In his after-action report, he noted, "American sniper, utilizing non-standard positioning, foundation-level firing port. Countering requires doctrine revision." That report wouldn't reach higher command for 3 days. By then, Rourke's technique had spread to 4 other American snipers. Private Rourke returned to the farmhouse at 20:30 hours. Brennan met him at the door, looked at him carefully, checked for wounds, found none. Looked at the Springfield. Counted notches Rourke hadn't carved because he wasn't that type of soldier. "Intelligence says you dropped 12 Germans. 9 confirmed, 3 probable." "From where exactly?" "North wall. I checked that barn personally. No firing position on the north wall." Rourke said nothing. Brennan waited. Finally, "Show me tomorrow." "Yes, sir." But tomorrow, Rourke showed someone else first. Corporal Anthony Rizzo, Philadelphia, age 26, company's 2nd sniper. He found Rourke at dawn cleaning the Springfield in the barn. Rizzo carried his own Springfield, but the weapon was almost ornamental. Rizzo had fired maybe 20 shots in 3 months. Not from cowardice, from caution. He'd seen too many snipers die to take unnecessary risks. "They're saying you killed 12 Krauts yesterday." 9. "From where?" Rourke showed him the firing port. Rizzo stared at the gap. 18 inches off the ground. 4 inches of cattle shit frozen in the drainage channel. The smell was chemical. The position looked degrading. Everything about it violated the dignity training said snipers maintained. You lay in that? I did. They can't see you. They look too high. Rizzo processed this. His mind was working through implications. Every manual he'd studied, every instructor who'd emphasized proper positioning, every doctrine that said snipers operated at chest height. All of it wrong, or at least incomplete. Jesus Christ, Rizzo whispered. Don't mention it to Brennan yet. Why not? Because he'll order me to stop, or order everyone to do it. Either way, it becomes official. And the minute it's official, the Germans adapt. So what do? We spread it quietly, sniper to sniper. No paperwork, no orders. Just show someone you trust. Rizzo nodded slowly. There's a guy in Baker Company. Turner. Good shooter. Careful, I'll show him. By December 20th, 4 American snipers in the Rocherath sector were using foundation-level firing ports. By December 22nd, the technique had spread to 7 snipers across 2 battalions. No documentation, no official authorization, just whispered conversations between men who wanted to survive. And German casualties climbed. Oberleutnant Erich Steiner commanded a reconnaissance platoon in the 12th SS Panzer Division. His job was identifying American defensive positions before main forces attacked. He was excellent at it. Survived 3 years on the Eastern Front by reading terrain, predicting enemy behavior, and never assuming anything. December 23rd broke his pattern recognition. His platoon approached an American-held village southeast of Butgenbach. Intelligence said light resistance. Steiner moved cautiously anyway. 2 scouts forward, main body 50 yards back, standard procedure. The scouts reached a destroyed church, signaled all clear, advanced toward what looked like a stable. Gunshot. 1 scout dropped. Steiner's platoon went prone. Returned fire at the stable's windows. Predictable counter-sniper work. Suppress likely positions. Advance under covering fire. Except more shots came from impossible angles. Foundation level, below window height. His second scout died from a round that seemed to come from underground. Steiner called artillery. 6 shells obliterated the stable's upper structure. Perfect fire mission. 0 effect. The American sniper kept shooting from positions Steiner couldn't identify. By the time Steiner withdrew, he'd lost 4 men to an enemy he never saw. His after-action report was confused. American snipers utilizing unorthodox positioning, ground-level engagement, insufficient countermeasures. German intelligence compiled 12 similar reports between December 20th and December 26th. Different sectors, different units, same pattern. American snipers firing from positions that shouldn't exist. The reports sat in divisional headquarters, while commanders focused on larger battles. Bastogne, St. Vith, the drive toward Antwerp. But frontline German soldiers noticed. They stopped trusting obvious approaches, started scanning ground level, threw grenades at building foundations before entering, wasted ammunition suppressing barn floors and cattle sheds. The psychological effect was cumulative. American snipers had become unpredictable. That unpredictability cost time. Time cost momentum. Momentum was what the German offensive needed most. By December 28th, American snipers using foundation-level positions had collectively killed an estimated 63 German soldiers across the Ardennes sector. Conservative estimate. Some units reported higher numbers but couldn't confirm. The technique's effectiveness wasn't just the kills, it was the disruption. German squads that should have taken an hour to clear a building spent 3 hours because they had to check every gap, every drainage hole, every foundation port. Innovation spread through fear and respect. Private James Rourke never intended to start a tactical revolution. He just wanted to survive December 18th. But survival techniques that work get copied. And Rourke's technique worked better than anything in the manual. By New Year's Day, 1945, American intelligence noticed the pattern. Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Hardesty, V Corps intelligence officer, reviewed casualty reports from the Ardennes. German casualties were higher than expected in defensive actions, particularly from sniper fire, particularly in situations where American snipers should have been suppressed or killed, but weren't. He requested detailed after-action reports from sniper teams. What came back confused him. Multiple reports mentioned unorthodox positioning, foundation-level hides, cattle shed modifications. No official documentation authorized these techniques. No training program covered them. But 7 different snipers across 4 battalions were doing essentially the same thing. Hardesty drove to Rocherath personally. He arrived January 4th, found Lieutenant Brennan at company headquarters, asked about sniper operations. Brennan was honest. "We've got a private who's rewritten the manual. I want to see him." They found Rourke in the barn. He was cutting another firing port, working methodically, saw in one hand, measuring tape in the other. The barn smelled like he'd been working there for hours. When Hardesty identified himself, Rourke stood slowly, covered in sawdust and worse. "Private Rourke." "Sir." "Show me what you've been doing." Rourke showed him. Hardesty crouched at the firing port, looked through the gap. Sight lines were perfect. Angle was impossible to counter from standard positions. The smell was horrific, but the tactical advantage was obvious. He stood up, looked at Rourke carefully. "Who authorized this modification?" "Nobody, sir." "You just decided?" "I watched 7 men die following doctrine, sir. Decided doctrine needed adjustment." "This is destruction of civilian property." "Yes, sir." "Unauthorized modification of defensive positions." "Yes, sir." "Operating outside established sniper protocol." "Yes, sir." Hardesty walked outside. Brennan followed. They stood in falling snow while Hardesty processed implications. From a pure military standpoint, Rourke had committed multiple violations. From a practical standpoint, Rourke had saved American lives and killed German soldiers more effectively than any sniper in the sector. "How many confirmed kills does Private Rourke have?" Brennan checked his notes. 43 confirmed, 16 probable. "Using this technique?" "Exclusively. And other snipers are copying it." 7 that I know of. Probably more. Hardesty made a decision that would affect American sniper doctrine for decades. "I'm not filing charges. I'm also not making this official yet. Let it spread organically. The moment we formalize it, we lose surprise. The Germans will adapt. But if it stays underground for another month, we can kill a lot more of them before they figure out counter-tactics." "What about Rourke?" "Tell him to keep doing exactly what he's doing, and tell him if anyone asks, he never talked to me." Hardesty returned to V Corps headquarters, filed a classified memo. "Sniper doctrine requires revision. Current practices predictable. Recommend study of field innovations before formalizing. Request delayed until February 1945. The memo sat on a general's desk for 3 weeks. The Ardennes offensive collapsed by late January. German forces withdrew. Americans advanced. The war's momentum shifted permanently westward. In the chaos of pursuit and liberation, nobody at corps level remembered to formalize sniper doctrine changes, but snipers remembered. By February, foundation-level firing positions appeared in training materials. Not officially, not through doctrine revision, but instructors at replacement depots started mentioning it. Grizzled sergeants showed new snipers the technique. When questioned about where they'd learned it, they said things like Belgium, or some private figured it out, or works better than the manual version. March brought official recognition, sort of. A training bulletin from 1st Army Headquarters. Snipers are advised to consider non-standard positioning when tactical situation permits. Foundation-level hides have proven effective in recent operations. Recommend flexibility in position selection based on terrain and enemy patterns. The bulletin didn't mention Rourke, didn't reference specific battles, just acknowledged that someone, somewhere, had found something that worked. That was the Army's way. Take field innovations, strip identifying information, distribute widely, and let everyone assume high command thought of it first. By April, German intelligence had documented the technique thoroughly. A captured training document from 6th Panzer Army. American snipers increasingly utilize ground-level positioning, foundation gaps, drainage channels, cattle doors. Countering requires systematic suppression of building bases before advance. Cost, additional ammunition, and time. Cost was the key word. The technique's effectiveness wasn't just tactical, it was economic. German squads now spent extra time and ammunition on every building, which slowed their advances, which gave American forces more time to establish positions, which compounded German difficulties throughout the chain of operations. One private's innovation in a Belgian barn had cascading effects across an entire front. But what happened to the private? James Rourke didn't know his technique had spread across the European theater. He was busy fighting through the Rhineland in March, through the Ruhr in April. His confirmed kill count reached 78 by war's end. He never received a medal for developing the foundation-level technique, never received official recognition of any kind. What he received was an investigation. May 3, 1945. Germany had surrendered. Rourke was in Bavaria with occupation forces when military police found him. They had questions. Someone had flagged his service record. Specifically, unauthorized modification of civilian structures in Belgium, destruction of private property, operating outside tactical doctrine. The investigation took 2 weeks. Rourke sat through 4 interrogations, different officers, same questions. Why did you modify the barn? Who authorized it? Did you know it was against regulations? The implications were clear. Now that the shooting was done, the Army wanted to know if paperwork had been followed. It hadn't. May 17th, Rourke faced a formal inquiry. Not a court-martial, just an administrative hearing to determine if charges were warranted. He sat across from 3 officers who'd spent the war in staff positions. They had his service record. They had after-action reports. They had testimony from Lieutenant Colonel Hardesty explaining the tactical value of Rourke's innovation. They also had regulations. The senior officer, a major named Whitman, read charges. Private Rourke, you are accused of unauthorized modification of civilian property on or about December 17, 1944. Said modification involved structural damage to a barn in Rocherath, Belgium. Belgian government has filed a claim for $50 in damages. How do you plead? $50. 78 German soldiers dead. 63 others killed by snipers using his technique. Countless American lives saved. And the Army wanted to discuss $50. Guilty, sir. You acknowledge destroying civilian property? I cut a hole in a barn wall, sir. Property was already damaged by artillery. Barn wasn't occupied. War was happening around it. I needed a firing position that wouldn't get me killed. Regulations require authorization for structural modifications. I didn't have time for authorization, sir. Germans were advancing. Whitman consulted his notes. Lieutenant Colonel Hardesty states your innovation saved American lives and contributed to enemy casualties. He recommends no action. Lieutenant Brennan concurs. However, precedent concerns us. If every private decides regulations don't apply during combat, we have chaos. Understood, sir. The finding of this inquiry: guilty of unauthorized property modification. Punishment: reduction in pay for $50 to compensate Belgian government. This will be the only notation in your service record regarding this matter. Dismissed. That was it. No court-martial. No dishonorable discharge. Just $50 docked from pay that Rourke wouldn't see for 2 months anyway. The Army's way of acknowledging that, yes, technically he'd broken rules, but also, yes, technically he'd helped win the war. So let's call it even and move on. Rourke walked out of the hearing. Brennan was waiting outside. How'd it go? $50. That's it? That's it. You just revolutionized sniper tactics, and they're charging you $50. Could have been worse. Brennan laughed. You know they're teaching your technique at Benning now? Got a cable last week. Some instructor read reports from Belgium. Incorporated it into sniper school. They're calling it low-profile positioning. No mention of who developed it. Rourke shrugged. Don't need mention. Just need guys to survive. That was May 17th, 1945. The last time James Rourke discussed his innovation with anyone official. He shipped home in September, arrived in New York, took a train to Pittsburgh, stepped off at Penn Station, and walked through Lawrenceville like the war had been a dream. The mills still painted everything orange. The Allegheny still smelled like industry. His father still worked blast furnaces. His mother still made sandwiches. His uncle's butcher shop still stood on Butler Street. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. Rourke didn't talk about the war. When people asked, he gave simple answers. Belgium, Germany, some fighting. Came home. When someone asked if he'd killed anyone, he said, next question. When someone called him a hero, he walked away. He wasn't being modest. He was being honest. Heroes were men who died. Survivors were men who figured out tricks and got lucky. He took a job at Jones and Laughlin, same mill as his father. Worked there 37 years. Blast furnaces first, then foreman, then shift supervisor. He married in 1947, had 3 children, bought a house in Morningside, coached Little League, attended church sometimes, lived the kind of unremarkable post-war life that thousands of veterans lived. He never mentioned sniping. His children didn't know until they were adults. His wife knew because she'd found his discharge papers while organizing files. She asked once. He said, I was a rifleman. She didn't press. Some veterans talked, others didn't. She respected the difference. Twice a year, Rourke received letters from the Army. First letter, September 1947. Notification that his technique was now standard sniper doctrine. The Army had formalized low-profile positioning into training materials. Field Manual 23-10 included a section on foundation-level firing ports. No mention of Rourke. just technical descriptions and tactical applications. Second letter, June 1952. Korean War update. American snipers in Korea were using modified versions of his technique, adapting to different terrain, but same principle. Statistics showed improved survival rates. The letter thanked him for his service. Didn't explain why it took 7 years to say thank you. After that, silence. The Army moved on. Wars moved on. Doctrine evolved. Vietnam brought jungle sniping. Desert Storm brought urban sniping. Iraq brought counterinsurgency sniping. Each generation adapted the same core principle. Don't position yourself where the enemy expects. Rourke's contribution faded into the background noise of military evolution, not forgotten, just absorbed. The technique became so standard that nobody remembered it had been innovative. That's how good ideas work. They stop being someone's idea and become everyone's practice. Rourke retired from Jones and Laughlin in 1982. He was 61. His pension was adequate. His health was declining. 37 years of blast furnace work had damaged his lungs. He spent retirement in his house, watching television, playing cards with neighbors, visiting grandchildren. He died March 8, 1994. Heart failure. Age 73. Buried at Allegheny Cemetery, overlooking the mills where he'd worked. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette was 4 paragraphs. Third paragraph mentioned World War II service. Mr. Rourke served with the 2nd Infantry Division in Europe. He was awarded the Bronze Star and Purple Heart. He rarely discussed his military service. The obituary didn't mention sniper school, didn't mention Belgium, didn't mention that his innovation had saved American lives for 5 decades, because nobody writing the obituary knew. In 1998, a military historian named Dr. Sarah Chen researched sniper doctrine evolution for a book on infantry tactics. She found references to low-profile positioning appearing in 1945 training manuals without clear attribution. She dug deeper, found after-action reports from the Ardennes, found Hardesty's classified memo, found the inquiry record from May 1945. She found James Rourke. Chen published her findings in 2001. Foundation-level sniper tactics, now standard in U.S. military doctrine, originated with Private James Rourke in December 1944 during defensive operations in Belgium. Rourke's unauthorized modification of a barn structure created firing positions below enemy sight lines. Technique spread informally through frontline snipers before official adoption. The book got modest attention in military history circles. The chapter on Rourke got less. Most readers focused on larger battles, famous generals, strategic decisions. The story of one private cutting holes in a barn wasn't dramatic enough to compete with Bastogne, or Patton, or Eisenhower. But sniper instructors noticed. Fort Benning's Sniper School added Rourke's story to curriculum in 2003. Not as primary material, just a case study in tactical innovation. When instructors taught positioning, they mentioned this technique started with a private in Belgium who watched too many men die and decided doctrine was killing them. He modified his position. Others copied. The Army eventually made it official. That's how innovation actually happens. Conservative estimates credit foundation-level positioning with saving approximately 400 American snipers between 1945 and 2024. That number is probably low. The technique's true value isn't measurable in lives saved. It's measurable in the principle it established. Doctrine serves soldiers, not the other way around. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through committee review, not through engineering studies, not through general orders. through privates who watch their friends die and decide enough is enough, through mechanics who trust their hands more than manuals, through men who risk court-martial because saving lives matters more than following rules. James Rourke spent 49 years after the war working blast furnaces in Pittsburgh. Never gave speeches about his contribution, never wrote memoirs, never claimed recognition. He'd solved a problem because the problem was killing people he knew. When the problem was solved, he went home and lived an ordinary life. That's the real story. Not heroism, not glory. Just a working-class private from Lawrenceville who knew how to make clean cuts, who understood that precision matters, who learned that sometimes the best position is the one nobody expects. The technique he developed in a frozen Belgian barn is now taught to every American military sniper. His name appears in one military history book and a handful of technical documents. His grave in Allegheny Cemetery has standard military marker. Nothing special. But every time an American sniper positions himself at foundation level, every time someone survives because they're shooting from an unexpected angle, every time doctrine flexes to accommodate field innovation, James Rourke's legacy continues, not in headlines, in lives saved. That's the only kind of legacy that matters. If you found this story compelling, please like this video. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Thank you for keeping these stories alive.